Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at Earth and Sky. All of you online, we really appreciate your likes, your loves, your feedbacks, and your feedbacks. And anytime you request videos, we always appreciate that. And today is a video that was requested from one of our viewers here. And we are going to talk about dealing with difficult people. We had another topic. Exactly. I've got a list.
Yeah, that's totally what I meant. That's totally what I meant. She's got great ideas.
So anyway, we did a topic a little while ago where we were, it was a different topic, but it segued in and touched a little bit on having to deal with people and that can be in challenging situations.
Oh, right,
but we didn't really talk about how to deal with people that can be really upsetting to us and sometimes hard to deal with, and it can be challenging neighbors sometimes, or sometimes it can be a spouse that gives you a lot of grief, or it can be somebody that you don't know. Sometimes you'll be in a grocery store or a hardware store and you deal with somebody who can be very confrontational. There are a lot of different situations where sometimes it's someone you know, sometimes it's somebody you don't know, but the techniques can be a little bit different for dealing with both of those. I brought JJ along today because he's really great at challenging people. I mean, dealing with challenging people.
I'm the one that's good at challenging people.
And so I wanted to talk first about if it's somebody that you know. If it's somebody that you know and maybe you can plan, but what would you do if there's somebody, let's say, putting you in a situation that you just have to have a hard conversation with somebody, and you know they tend to be confrontational, and you're not sure that they're really going to listen to you, but you feel like it's...
I have no idea what that's like.
You feel like it's important. You can be more specific with the scenario if you want.
Well, that's what I mean. The main thing about, first, when in any conversation, I mean, it's, what you want to get out of it is where you need to kind of start, right? I mean, if you're going to have...
The first key is knowing.
Where do you want this to end? Where do you want to, so, one of the things you were saying was, if you're in a grocery store and somebody's very confrontational, or they're giving you a lot of grief, usually what you want to accomplish is getting away from that person. You probably want to get away from them, but in the most, in whatever way that either you're trying to just nullify the situation and leave, or or wrap up whatever the situation is as quickly as possible and leave. And so usually leaving is kind of where you're trying to what you're trying to get done. But if you're trying to have if it's a friend of yours, or maybe member or something, and they have a tendency to be a little stubborn or a little confrontational, and you need to have this conversation. It's what are you trying to get out of it? So that's the first part you want to really figure out.
And that's really the main number one key, whether it's somebody you know or somebody you don't know. Knowing ahead of time, which kind of puts you in a position then of thinking instead of reacting emotionally, because you pull yourself out of the emotion to go, what am I looking for?
Yeah, because that's usually, the quickest way for a situation to start to fall apart is if you start to become emotional about it. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is, you will not ever get ahead in the situation if you start becoming emotional about it. So, like I said, so if you want to figure out where you want this thing to end. The way that I usually make sure that you kind of get a leg up on a situation is if you walk into the situation, you start the conversation, and you kind of guide the situation. That gives you the ability to kind of have the, lack of a better term, upper hand in the situation, and allows you to really, you can plan out what you're going to say. One of the main things I do is I walk into the situation, and I actually like to flip it. So I become the person getting this information, and then from there you can go, okay, if somebody says, they are requesting something, why would I not want to do this? What are the things that would make me want to give into that? And so it gives you that where you have the ability to start planning. What would seem worth it? What would not seem worth it? You know, whether it's whether you have to go in and you have to be like, this is really important to me, or you have to turn it to a point of view where you have to suddenly make it really important to them, you know, but you have to go through these, and so I'll go through multiple conversations in my head or even out loud, like I'll kind of talk it through out loud.
I find that, just to add to that, talking something out loud can really be helpful.
It
Because
does.
sometimes we can think certain ideas in our head, but to put words to them often doesn't happen until you actually say the words out loud, even if it's to yourself.
Like you're running through these paragraphs of words in your head that you're trying to say to someone, and you're like, you know, da 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 da, and you're thinking all of these things, but actually verbalizing, saying the words from your mouth is a different approach to the thought process. And it slows everything down. When you're thinking about it, you can run over ideas really fast, you know, this idea, that idea, I can say this, I can say that, I can bring up this, there was that time they did that, you know, and you're trying to put this whole thing together, this storyline that you're trying to put together, and if you're thinking about it, it can come together really fast and easy. But once you stop and try to take those same thoughts and put them in a sequential order, all of a sudden you'll get a couple lines into it, and then it doesn't sound like it did in your head. So then you have to rephrase, and while you're rephrasing, you forgot where you were going, and I mean, and really, you know, and so...
especially if it's confrontational.
Especially if it's confrontational. And I mean, so my first thing is, get what you're going to say, the points you want to use, you know what I mean, and then you start the whole process knowing and being prepared. And so you can't ask for much better in a situation than walking into it prepared. And then the second thing that I usually try to make sure of, if it's going to be confrontational, is you go in, whatever the person, so if you're coming to them, they're going to be generally more emotional about the situation than you are, because you're prepared to not be emotional. And so I find that if I try to be about half of their intensity. So if it's a situation that they're like, what are you talking about? I mean, if they're calm, it's pretty easy to be calm. But they start getting, why do you want to talk about this? I don't think this is right. You have no place to say this stuff. You know, that kind of thing. As their intensity grows, I try to keep my intensity about half of what theirs is. Now, as theirs grows, I agree with the idea of yours can grow a little bit, because it shows that you're with them. You know what I mean? You keep the conversation. It helps them show that you're engaged with them.
Oh, okay, I could see that, so you don't feel like, they don't think you're just very distant.
Yeah, you're just completely removed from it. You're engaged with them. So if they're getting more and more, you can get a little bit more, but try to keep it at about half of their intensity or less, you know. But like I said, but if they get really, you can get a little more than what you are.
And by intensity, you mean the volume and
the speed of the conversation. You know, your posture, of course, says a lot about what, if you're just like da 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 da, that's a completely different than, you know, hand movements, all of that shows intensity. And so, but you always have to be less than that.
That makes a lot of
And
sense.
that will always, so that will benefit you. And then like I said, and then once you get done with that, if they are not seeing your way, if they're not wanting to go with it, I usually try to just, you know, you leave it with an open thought, you leave it with what your, like the last statements are, that the last statements that you say should be relatively neutral and reiterate the point that you were trying to get across to them. And even if it doesn't go your way, and a lot of times it's funny, people, because they're emotional and in a situation, if you want something, you're trying to get information across, you're trying to get them to do something, whatever, when you talk to them, if you are having a calm, rational discussion and it seems like a reasonable request, especially if you are the calm one in it, they will have a tendency, they almost feel like they need to do it, because they will feel like you've presented in a way where they've kind of failed. you know, and that's, I mean, not failed, but
They want to be right.
they want, yeah, well, they want to be right, but if you present it in a nice manner, in an objective manner, and you stay calm, they feel like, it's like, and then they'll go, okay, fine, you win, kind of a
Okay.
thing. I mean, I know, not, like, a win isn't probably the right term, but they usually will help go with whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, so.
One of the things people have said often to me is that it's hard to be mad at somebody who is calm. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the biggest key things.
Yeah.
If you have somebody, and this can work whether it's somebody that you don't know and you just meet and you're starting to have a debate about something, or maybe somebody is causing an issue that's a stranger at a store, or it can be somebody that you know as well. But when you see somebody that's approaching you and you can tell they're kind of confrontational, you see them posturing, or they've got that stance, they're walking towards you, or
And
their voice is
you're-
escalating.
That little voice in your head goes, uh-oh.
Oh no. The first thing you should do is take a breath and just really
Yeah.
calm yourself
That's-
down. The number one thing in my mind is to keep yourself really
Yeah.
nice and calm. And so when you take that breath, it starts to trigger in your mind, this is okay. This isn't actually a threat. Our brain has a fight or flight response programmed into us. And so that's a primary reason why when there's confrontation, people will either just like jump up and start yelling, or, you know, and being very animated, or other people just want to run away and be like, you know what? I want no part of this. Goodbye.
Yeah.
And nothing's resolved
Yeah.
with either of those situations. So instead, if you take a deep breath and you just kind of pull yourself back, you acknowledge that you see the person in front of you that is being really confrontational, and you recognize it's not an actual dangerous threat that your brain is trying to tell you with those chemicals
Yeah,
being released. And one of the little tricks you can do is just to put your hand on your stomach. You don't want to cross your arms because that's going to make them feel like you're holding them at bay.
puffing.
But just take one of your hands and put it right on your abdomen, either the lower abdomen or the upper abdomen, either one, whichever feels better. And that creates a signal into your brain of letting you feel like there's some protection around you. It helps to signal
So
a calming
it
response.
kind of does what this, because that's what people do this, because you feel
Protect.
safe.
Mhm.
And so it does
creating
that
a guard.
without putting your guard up.
Exactly.
Okay,
So you're
all right.
still showing that you're engaged in the conversation, but you just have that one, or if you feel really uptight, you can put both, but just very lightly, loosely have your hands there. It's a great way to guard and deflect the energy that's coming at you as well from them. And then the first thing you want to do is listen to what they have to say. Because if it's somebody that's approaching you, if you're approaching them, then your technique is perfect.
Yeah.
Plan out ahead of time what you want to say and work through from their viewpoint how they will
Challenging.
take that
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
But if it's somebody that's coming to you, listen to what they're saying and repeat it back to them, whether you agree with it or not. They're not going to hear a word you say until they feel like you've heard and understood where they're coming from. Otherwise, they're just going to keep fighting their point over and over, and you won't get anywhere.
Yeah.
Which is exactly why you're saying if it's somebody you're preparing for, then you think it through from their perspective. So you can say, look, I understand you feel this way. I understand this is an issue. Let's find some common ground to work this through. And so you can do that on either side. Listen to them, say it back to them, even if you don't agree with it, and then share your viewpoint. And find out if there are some areas that can be common ground. Find out what those common ground things are, and start to reiterate that so that you can come from a place of recognizing there are some things that we agree on, even if it's little parts
Little
of these
bits,
details.
right.
There are certain things that we both want. If it's a neighbor that is upset with you about something, then you can find common ground with knowing that you both want to be peaceful neighbors.
Yeah.
You want to have
We
a
want-
good neighborhood that feels comfortable for your families.
And in the future, you want the relationship to be a good relationship, because nobody wants to
Fight.
be at odds with their neighbor. I mean, that's just nothing but turmoil.
Exactly. So you find those little parts of common ground, and then you start to build from those too. And just really keeping that sense of calm is one of the biggest keys, because it's
Yes.
very hard to be upset and angry and yell at somebody who is being very calm and peaceful and
Yeah.
just okay, I
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah.
And that's going to help their intensity to go down. So you and I kind of go on different viewpoints with that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it probably just depends on the situation. There might be times where you feel like you can just maintain that sense of calm. There might be other times where you feel like you want to increase your intensity a little, making sure it's about 50% or less of the person that
Yeah.
you're talking to. So they will still hear your point, but you're not just fighting a wasted battle.
And I think that depending on who you are, how your energy is, plays into that.
Absolutely.
I think like you
have
naturally,
to be yourself.
you're naturally more calm than I am, so
Mhm.
you staying like much calmer works very much in your favor.
Right.
I think that if I would suddenly be completely super calm,
Be
I
a
think
little eerie.
people would be like, "What is wrong with you?"
It might be a little
That
eerie.
He's acting weird, and I don't like it.
Yeah, and if you are wanting to work on that within yourself, and I'm not reflecting this at you, but if you feel like you have a hard time when you're dealing with confrontation or different situations with keeping that sense of calm. So many people within their nature go right into heightened
Right, yeah,
emotions.
yeah.
And when you're in heightened emotions, it's really hard to make headway on anything when you're trying to move forward with confrontation or something that's a hard topic to discuss. And so meditation is one of the biggest keys of that. The reason it's important to meditate every day is so that when these challenging times arise in life, as life always brings us, you have a natural button within yourself where you can push that button
pull
and
it
come
down.
back into
Yeah.
calm ease.
Absolutely.
It's not about the day-to-day feeling of meditation as much as it is when these situations arise. You can pull in with that and find that
You can
sense
grab
of
that,
peace.
that feeling of anxiety, you suddenly can grab hold and have control of it quickly.
Exactly.
Because it is a very hard thing. I mean, especially if you don't do it much, you're not used to trying to be in a stressful situation, being calm. I mean, you get the shakes, and you can get sweaty, your stomach gets upset. I mean, there can be so many feelings that go with it. And one of the big ones is, like you said, like if you do meditation every day, you learn to grab your emotions wherever they're at, pull them down, and and you get to choose, as opposed to just all of these floods of emotion, all these floods of things happen, and you just have no say over it.
Exactly.
And that can be very difficult.
And finding ways to be amicable with people, even that are really difficult. I think
Yeah.
that's a primary thing we've lost in our culture a lot.
Compromise.
As we see so much with political situations and opinions of different things, where
Well-
people have different preferences and opinions, and it gets to where things become so polarized, people feel like they can't be amicable because they feel like the other person is counter to them because they have a different opinion. Both sides end up rising with this zest
All
and
or
passion,
nothing.
and then there's no peace that
there's
ends
no
up
middle
getting
ground.
brokered.
Yeah.
All it takes is one person on one side to lower that intensity, to be amicable, and to recognize we're looking for the same
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
There's some
exactly.
common ground somewhere within
Across
this.
the board.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So if
And
you do that yourself.
And
you
I think
become-
I think that's twofold though too, in the sense that in today's society, I mean, we get everything we want when we want it,
Mhm.
and we get exactly what we want. And I think we've been so fed that so much that we think that we're owed that, sort of. It's
Right.
like, well, in every other aspect of my life, I get exactly what I want. Why can't I have exactly what I want right now?
Right.
And it's like, well, because you're dealing with another person, and I think we have started to lose that. When you deal with someone else, compromise is part of the deal.
Absolutely, and I think some people feel on that same token, but they feel like they never get what they want. They feel like everything is owed to them, and they feel so dissatisfied and so unhappy with life, and they're missing the picture of what they actually do have
they
in
do
life
have.
because they're so focused on what they don't have,
Yeah.
and they're so focused on the negative or what the other person has that they don't have,
Right, right.
and they lose sight of
Yeah.
what there is to be grateful for
Yeah.
in their life. And so, yeah, that amicability, that lowering the intensity. I think one of the primary things I love, you said something really similar to this earlier today, but being assertive and factual
Oh,
is
yeah.
primary.
Yeah, that's where when you're having this conversation, like I said, when when you're structuring it in your head, I try to use things that are, or I try to approach it in a way that's more fact-based, that's more, I make statements about things that are pretty much, when I say them, that they're put in a way that the person really can't or wouldn't go, no, that's not true, in their own mind as you're saying them. And the more you do that, the more they kind of go, okay, and they go, okay. And each time you say something, and the person that you are worried about this confrontation or is confrontational, each time in their mind that they go, okay, or yes, and they agree with what it is you said, it works in your favor. Because people really, we are so simple in that you get us started down that road. You get somebody started walking down the road of, yes, they agree with you, yes, they agree with you, then they suddenly just get in a habit of agreeing with you. Suddenly it's like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Now, and as long as you don't say something that they go, wait a minute, no way, as long as you can keep away from that, by the time you get done, they, even with things that aren't necessarily in their favor, but as long as they believe that it's true, they'll say okay to that as well. And so, I mean, you can lead people down the okay path.
And compromise is always give and take. So
Absolutely.
Sometimes that path of getting the yes or getting the okay is you letting them know what you're letting go of or what
Yep.
you maybe disagree with, but that you understand their point of view
Yep.
on as
Yep.
well.
The compromise of it.
Give and take.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So I mean, if you're trying to get them to do something for you, giving up some of doing something that would benefit them ahead of time, having that be part of the discussion. I will go blah, 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 and they go, oh, that's nice, if you would da, 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 da. And then they go, but because you are already doing something for them in their mind, well, sure, I could do that. So, I mean, it's give and take, but if you start off with the give first,
Right.
Sometimes you can do a little take on it, and it works out very nicely, which again is the compromise.
Exactly. And when we say assertive and factual, it's basically the opposite of aggressive and emotional.
Yes.
And a lot of times people lead into confrontation with feeling like if I can just be the most aggressive, or people don't think and they just are highly emotional and just speaking out everything that they're feeling in that moment, and things get very heated
Yep.
and lost in the picture of
Absolutely.
it. The whole point often will get lost. So
Absolutely.
assertive instead of aggressive, factual instead of emotional.
Yep.
Will help keep you on point as you're working through.
Yep.
Any other thoughts?
I don't think so. Oh, look them in the eye. That's the
Yeah.
other thing. Because you're going to be a little nervous and a little probably anxious, you're going to want to look down, and that because it feels safer, you're going to need to shoulders back, stand up straight, and look them in the eye.
Feel the confidence,
Feel the
even if you don't
confidence.
feel confidence
Exactly.
inside. Show the confidence.
Project the confidence even if
feel
you don't feel it. Exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think
yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, so just in a quick summary
Okay.
of it then, so if it's somebody that you know that you're needing to engage in and you're nervous about it, think about it from their perspective before you start to talk to them about it. Prepare in your head. Talk the points out loud so that you actually have the words coming to you instead of just the feeling that comes inside. Remember to always keep your intensity quite a bit below theirs, maybe 50% below theirs, or depending on your personality, maybe just keep yourself calm through it. It's
Do the
very
whole thing,
hard,
yep.
very hard to be angry at somebody who is
Calm.
and which brings you to the next part of being amicable. As long as you can find some common ground, that can sometimes help. Sometimes you might not feel like there's common ground, but if you dig deeper and you look at the reasonings of why you feel the way you feel, why they feel the way they do, it might be that you're both looking for the same things with completely different viewpoints.
Yeah.
So figure out where the common ground is, being amicable as best as you can as you work to compromise, coming to a solution together, being assertive, not aggressive, factual instead of emotional, and really remembering, think it through, think of their perspective, talk out loud, find common ground, take a breath whenever you feel your anxiety coming up, or whenever you feel the rage coming up, or whenever you start to feel threatened.
Yeah.
Take a breath, put your hand on your stomach,
rise.
Exactly. You got this. I know you do. So I hope that gives you some food for thought of some ways to deal with people in challenging situations that can happen in a myriad of ways.
All over the place.
So, and we always, as always, appreciate your feedback.
Absolutely.
We appreciate your likes, your loves, your shares. Really mean the world to us.
Mhm.
And we will see you next week.